I gifted my parents a $425,000 seaside mansion for their 50th anniversary. When I arrived, my mother. Welcome back. Hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe. Today's story will blow your mind. The sun had already dipped halfway beneath the horizon by the time my car rolled up the narrow coastal road that led to the new house. The air smelled of salt and wild thyme, and the waves crashed far below like a heartbeat against the cliffs. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel, my heart thudding as I rounded the last bend and saw it, the house, gleaming in the last light of day. White stucco walls, wide glass windows that caught the setting sun, a wide balcony overlooking the endless gray-blue water. I'd imagined this moment for months. My parents' 50th anniversary, half a century together, half a century of struggle, sacrifice, and quiet, stubborn love. I wanted to give them something they never thought they could have, a place where they could finally rest, breathe, and be proud of everything they built. A $425,000 seaside mansion, paid for in full. I'd saved for years, invested carefully, taken risks I never told them about, and now it was real. As I stepped out of the car, the wind whipped at my jacket and tossed my hair across my face. The sound of gulls circled somewhere high above. I could already imagine my mother's reaction. Her hands pressed to her lips, her eyes watering, her voice trembling as she said, "You shouldn't have, darling." My father, stoic as always, would stand in the doorway, maybe with a single nod of approval that said more than words could. I smiled at the thought, but there was a nervous knot in my stomach, too, something heavy and strange that I couldn't name. Inside the car, the gift envelope sat on the passenger seat, a thick cream-colored folder with the deed papers and the house keys inside. I ran my thumb over it one last time, the gold ribbon slightly creased from my anxious fidgeting during the drive. This was it. This was supposed to be the best day of their lives. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something odd. The lights in the house were already on. Not just a lamp or two, but all of them. Every window glowed with a soft golden light like someone had been living there for days. I frowned. The real estate agent had promised it would be spotless, empty, and ready for their arrival. My parents were supposed to meet me here tomorrow morning for the big reveal. Tonight, it was supposed to be just me. To prepare, to set up the decorations, to make sure everything was perfect. But the house looked occupied. I hesitated, my hand halfway to the door handle. Maybe the cleaners were still here. Or maybe the agent had come by to drop something off. Still, there was something about the glow from those windows that felt wrong. Too warm, too alive. I forced myself to shake it off, grabbed the envelope, and stepped out into the crisp coastal air. The front gate creaked when I pushed it open. The garden path was lined with lavender and pale blue hydrangeas, the kind my mother loved. The smell was intoxicating, sweet, familiar, comforting. For a second, that unease melted away. Everything I'd done, every hour I'd worked late or risked a deal that could have sunk me, it all led here, to this moment. I unlocked the front door. The knob felt cold and smooth beneath my hand. I took a breath, smiling to myself, imagining my parents' laughter echoing through these halls. Then I pushed the door open. Music. Soft, lilting piano music floated through the air from somewhere deep inside the house. My heart skipped. The lights weren't just on, someone was home. "Hello," I called out, stepping inside. My voice sounded too loud against the marble floors and high ceilings. "Hello, this is private property. Hello?" No answer. The music continued, drifting faintly from the living room. Something by Debussy, I think. I followed it slowly, my shoes clicking on the polished tile. The air inside smelled faintly of vanilla candles and something else. Something floral, familiar. Like the perfume my mother used to wear when I was a child. I paused. The hairs on my arms stood up. That perfume. It couldn't be. I turned the corner and my breath caught. There, standing by the window with her back to me, was a woman. Her hair, soft gray and neatly tied in a bun, shimmered under the warm light. She was humming softly to the music, her fingers running along the white curtains. For a second, my mind couldn't catch up to what my eyes saw. Then she turned. "Mom?" She smiled gently as if she'd been expecting me all along. "You're early," she said. My throat went dry. "Mom, what? How how did you even get here? You weren't supposed to." She walked toward me, her bare feet silent against the marble. "I got your message," she said simply, her voice calm, almost distant. "About the surprise. I thought I'd come see it for myself." My pulse pounded in my ears. I hadn't told her a thing. I'd been planning this for months in secret. I hadn't sent any message. I didn't. I stopped myself. "I didn't tell you. How did you even. Who gave you the keys?" She tilted her head slightly, the faintest smile on her lips. "They were in the mailbox." I blinked. "The mailbox?" She nodded. "Along with a note from you." My hands trembled slightly. "Mom, I didn't. There was no note. There shouldn't be." Before I could finish, she reached out and took my hand. Her skin was cool, softer than I remembered. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's everything I ever wanted. You knew exactly what I dreamed of." I forced a smile, my heart still racing. "I'm glad you like it, but you shouldn't be here yet. I wanted it to be a surprise. Where's Dad?" Her expression shifted slightly. Something flickered behind her eyes, something I couldn't quite read. "He's resting," she said softly. "He was tired from the trip." "The trip?" She nodded again, slowly this time. "It was a long drive. The sea air helps him sleep." I tried to steady my breathing. None of this made sense. They didn't know where the house was. I hadn't told anyone the address. Even the real estate agent was supposed to send the final paperwork to me tomorrow morning. And yet, my mother was here, alone, acting like she'd lived here her whole life. "Mom," I said carefully, "what trip? Where did you come from? Did someone drop you off?" She looked at me for a long moment, her face calm but unreadable. "It doesn't matter," she said finally. "We're here now. That's what matters." There was something unsettling about the way she said we. I tried to smile, but my chest felt tight. "Right. Okay. Well, let me just let me check on Dad, make sure he's comfortable, yeah?" Her eyes flicked toward the staircase. "He's upstairs," she said. "Second door on the right." I started up the stairs, my footsteps echoing through the quiet. The music downstairs shifted to a new melody, still soft, still haunting. My mother's hum followed me faintly up the staircase. When I reached the second floor, the hallway stretched ahead, lined with framed paintings of ocean waves and distant lighthouses. I stopped at the second door on the right and hesitated. My hand hovered over the knob. I didn't know why I was nervous. Maybe it was just the strangeness of it all. Or maybe it was something deeper, a faint whisper in the back of my mind telling me that something was wrong here. I pushed open the door. The room was dark except for the pale blue light from the moon outside. The bed was made perfectly. Crisp sheets. Not a wrinkle. But there was no one there. "Dad?" I whispered. No answer. I flicked the light switch. The room glowed softly. Empty. No suitcase. No shoes. No sign of anyone having been there at all. My stomach dropped. I turned back toward the hallway and froze. My mother was standing at the end of it, watching me. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking a little. "Where's Dad?" She didn't move. For a long moment, she just looked at me, her face half in shadow. Then she said quietly, "You shouldn't wake him." "Wake him?" I took a step forward. "Mom, there's no one in there." Her lips curved into that same faint smile again. "He's here," she said softly. "You just have to listen." The words hung in the air like fog. "Listen to what?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly. "The sea." I frowned, trying to understand. "The sea?" She nodded once, then turned and walked away, her footsteps light, almost soundless as she descended the stairs. I stood there for a long time, the silence thick around me. Somewhere outside, the waves crashed against the cliffs, harder this time, louder, almost like something was beneath them, calling. My fingers trembled as I turned off the light and followed her back down. The house suddenly felt too big, too quiet. My footsteps echoed in places that didn't echo before. The smell of her perfume lingered in the air, stronger now. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, she was gone. The music had stopped. The only sound was the wind outside, whistling faintly through the cracks of the windows. I called her name once, twice. No answer. Then, from somewhere near the kitchen, I heard a soft voice, faint, low, like a whisper. It was my mother's voice, but she was singing. A song I hadn't heard since I was a child. The lullaby she used to hum when I was sick. I followed the sound slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, the golden light spilling out onto the floor. When I pushed it open, the smell hit me first, salt water and iron. Then I saw her, standing by the sink, staring out the window toward the dark ocean, humming that old song with her hands resting lightly on the counter. And next to her, on the counter itself, was something wrapped in a damp, sea-stained blanket, something roughly the size of a man's head. She turned slowly toward me, her eyes wet with tears, her voice trembling as she whispered, "He didn't want to leave the sea." My breath caught. The world tilted. "Mom," I said, barely able to speak. "What did you do?" She looked down at the bundle on the counter, her hand gently smoothing the fabric. "I brought him home," she said. The waves crashed again outside, louder, closer, like they were climbing the cliffs. And then she smiled. A small, distant smile that made my blood run cold. For a long time, I couldn't move. The air in the kitchen was heavy, thick, like it carried the ocean itself inside it. My mother stood still, her back to me again, her fingers tracing slow circles on the counter beside that damp, awful bundle. The smell of salt and iron clung to everything, clashing with the faint vanilla scent of her candles. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything that made sense, but my throat refused to work. I took one slow step forward, my shoes sticking faintly to the tile as if the air itself had turned viscous. "Mom," I said softly, "you need to tell me what's happening. Where's Dad?" She didn't answer. Her hand paused on the counter, her body still as a statue. I could hear the waves outside, the rhythmic, endless pulse of water on rock. It filled the silence until she finally spoke, her voice fragile, trembling but calm. "He belongs to the sea," she whispered. Something in her tone made my skin crawl. I forced myself to step closer, each movement deliberate, like I was afraid the house might wake up if I moved too quickly. The counter came into view, and I could see the blanket more clearly now. It was soaked through, patches of dark, briny dampness spreading across the white tile beneath it. A smell of decay, faint but real, lingered just beneath the salt. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. "Mom," I said again, "what's in there?" She turned to me then, her eyes bright with unshed tears, her lips trembling like a child's. "You shouldn't look," she said softly. "It'll hurt you." "I'm already hurt," I said before I could stop myself. "I've been hurt since I walked in this house." Her expression softened, and for a fleeting second she looked like herself again. The woman who used to brush my hair before school, who'd stay up all night waiting for me to come home from late shifts. Then, as if remembering something distant, her gaze drifted back toward the ocean through the window. "He called to me," she murmured. "He was waiting." I stared at her, feeling a mix of fear and heartbreak twist in my chest. "Mom, what are you talking about? Who was waiting?" She blinked slowly, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. "Your father. He said he wanted to see the sea one last time. You know how much he loved it. So I brought him here." My breath caught in my throat. "You brought him here?" She nodded, smiling faintly. "He's home now." I stepped forward, trying to steady my voice. "Mom, where's Dad's body?" Her eyes snapped toward me, sharp and sudden like she'd been jolted awake. "Don't say that word," she hissed, the sweetness in her tone vanishing in an instant. "He's not a body. He's my husband." My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I forced my voice low and calm, though my palms were slick with sweat. "Okay," I said quietly. "I understand. Just, please, let me see him. Let me help you." She looked down again at the bundle on the counter. Her hand hovered over it, trembling slightly. The blanket shifted, the faintest sound coming from beneath it, like a wet sigh or the exhale of trapped air escaping cloth. My entire body went rigid. Mom, I whispered, what did you bring into this house? Her eyes filled with tears again, spilling over her cheeks. I didn't want to leave him there, she said. He was cold. The sea was taking him, and I couldn't let it. I stepped forward before I could think, my hand reaching out. Mom, please, step back. She didn't move, so I reached for the bundle myself. Her hand shot out faster than I thought possible, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. Don't, she cried. He's not ready yet. Her nails dug into my skin, and for a moment I saw something wild in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or desperation. But behind it, something else. Something like awe. Mom, I said, trying to pull free, you're scaring me. Please. And then she let go. The sudden release threw me off balance, and I caught the edge of the counter to steady myself. My fingers brushed the blanket, just barely, and what I felt underneath made my blood run cold. It wasn't solid, it wasn't cold either, it was warm. I jerked my hand back instinctively, stumbling a few steps away. Jesus Christ, I whispered. Her expression softened again, her voice lowering to a hush. See, he's still here. The sea couldn't take him. My knees felt weak. That's not possible, I said. Dad's gone, Mom. He's been. She shook her head violently. No, you don't understand. He spoke to me. He said he wasn't ready to leave. I stared at her, my mouth dry, my mind clawing for logic where there was none. When, Mom? When did you talk to him? She looked confused for a moment, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for something invisible. Last night, she said finally. He came through the window. The waves carried his voice. I heard him calling me by name, just like he used to. I went outside, and there he was, by the rocks. He was smiling. Her voice cracked on that last word, and I felt something inside me break. Mom, I said softly, trying not to cry. That wasn't him. You saw something else. You've been under so much stress. I know my husband's voice, she shouted suddenly, the sound echoing off the walls like thunder. Then quieter, I know him. The silence that followed was unbearable. Only the wind outside filled the space between us. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words just wouldn't come. Finally, I stepped forward, carefully, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Okay, I said gently. Let's sit down, all right? We can talk about this. I'll make some tea. We can call someone. She turned sharply, her face pale but fierce. No one else, she said. This is between us. You, me, and him. Her gaze dropped again to the counter. I followed it. The blanket had shifted slightly, enough to see what lay beneath. A hand, pale, bloated. The fingernails tinged blue, my heart seized in my chest. I stumbled back, my breath catching. Oh my God, Mom! She reached down, smoothing the blanket back over it. Her movements gentle, almost tender. He's still waking up, she whispered. The sea takes its time. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe, my father. Or what was left of him. I felt bile rise in my throat. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to leave, to run, to call someone. But another part, some small, terrified part, was afraid to turn my back. I took a slow, shuddering breath. Mom, I said quietly, you need help. We need to go. Right now. Her eyes snapped up to mine again, wide and almost luminous in the dim light. If we leave, she whispered, he'll follow. I stared at her. What? Her lips trembled, her eyes filling again with tears. He doesn't want to be alone anymore. For a moment, I thought I heard something. Faint, muffled, a low, wet sound from beneath the blanket, like air bubbles rising through water. I froze. Then I heard another sound, faint footsteps, coming from somewhere behind me. I turned sharply. The kitchen doorway was empty, but the lights in the hallway flickered once. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder now, every noise amplified. My skin prickled. Mom, I whispered, who else is here? She didn't answer. I turned back to her, but she was gone. The kitchen was empty except for the bundle on the counter. I called her name, my voice breaking, but there was no response. The sound of the waves outside grew louder, the rhythm deepening, slower, like something huge was stirring beneath them. I forced myself to move, to back away from the counter, my eyes fixed on that awful, motionless shape. Then the lights flickered again, and the blanket twitched. A wet, rasping breath filled the room. I stumbled back, my legs hitting the chair behind me. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't move. The blanket shifted again, a faint groan. Then silence. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and bolted out of the kitchen, my heart hammering, the sound of my footsteps echoing down the hallway. I reached the front door and yanked it open, the night air hitting me like ice. The sea spread out before me, dark and endless, the wind whipping my hair across my face. And then I saw her, my mother, standing at the edge of the cliff. Her nightgown billowed in the wind, her hair whipping wildly around her face. She looked impossibly small against the vastness of the sea, her silhouette trembling with each gust. "Mom!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Get away from there!" She didn't turn. She just stood there, staring down at the waves below. I ran toward her, my shoes slipping on the wet grass. "Please!" I yelled. "Don't do this!" She finally turned her head slightly, just enough for me to see her profile. Her eyes glistened with tears, her expression strangely peaceful. "He's calling me," she said softly. I froze mid-step. "Mom, please, that's not him. It's the sea. It's just the waves." She smiled faintly. "He says he wants you too." And before I could reach her, she stepped forward and vanished into the darkness below. The sound of the waves swallowed her scream. I ran to the edge, my breath tearing out of my chest, my eyes scanning the churning black water below. "Mom!" I screamed into the wind. "Mom!" Nothing. Just the sea, vast and endless, reflecting the faint shimmer of the moon. I dropped to my knees, gasping, shaking. My phone slipped from my hand into the wet grass. My fingers clawed at the earth, desperate for something solid, something real. My mind was a blur of disbelief and horror and grief so deep it felt like drowning. And then I heard it. Behind me. A door creaking open. Slowly, from inside the house. The sound of that door creaking behind me cut through the roar of the ocean like a whisper of something alive. For a second, I couldn't move. My breath froze, my heart suspended mid-beat. The cliff beneath me felt as if it might crumble if I took one wrong breath. The sea below churned and hissed, its rhythm no longer the steady pulse of nature, but something restless, waiting. I turned slowly, forcing myself to face the house again. The door swayed open on its hinges, light spilling out in a thin line across the grass. I could see the faint shimmer of the marble floor beyond it, pale and cold under the interior lights. Everything inside looked perfectly still, perfectly ordinary, and yet it felt wrong, as if the house itself were breathing. The curtains moved slightly even though there was no wind inside. I whispered into the night, "Mom?" My voice barely made a sound. Nothing answered except the waves. I wanted to believe she'd somehow found a way back up, that she was inside again, safe. But something in my gut told me she wasn't, that the person, or whatever presence, inside that house was not her anymore. Still, I couldn't leave. Not yet. I stood, wiping my wet palms on my jeans, and began walking back toward the door. The grass brushed against my ankles, and every sound felt too loud in the darkness. The crunch of gravel beneath my shoes, the steady thud of my pulse in my ears. When I reached the porch, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorframe. Inside, the lights flickered once more. Just a quick tremor, like the heartbeat of the house itself. Then stillness. I stepped in. The warmth hit me immediately. The air inside was heavier than before, dense with the scent of candle wax and the faint tang of salt. Somewhere in the distance, the faint piano melody from before had started again. I could feel it vibrating faintly through the floor, the notes low, slow, almost mournful. "Mom!" I called out again, louder this time. My voice echoed off the high ceilings. No answer. The kitchen door stood half open now, the light beyond it dimmer. I stared at it, expecting to hear something. The same humming, the sound of her moving. But the only thing I heard was the faint, deliberate creak of floorboards from upstairs. I froze. That sound, slow, measured, deliberate, footsteps. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. Dad? I whispered before I could stop myself. The word came out hollow, foreign, no answer. But the footsteps continued, steady and unhurried, pacing above me like someone trying to remember how to walk. I took one slow step toward the staircase, my eyes darting toward the kitchen. The counter was empty, the blanket gone. The tiles beneath it were clean, spotless, as if nothing had ever been there. My pulse quickened. I was sure I hadn't imagined it, I'd seen it. The soaked fabric, the hand. But now the counter gleamed under the light. Not even a drop of water remained. The smell, though, it was still there. Faint, lingering. The smell of the ocean trapped in a house that had never touched it. Another footstep above, a low creak, then silence. I turned toward the stairs. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, the sound of my shoes on the wood swallowed by the strange stillness around me. The lights above cast long shadows that moved slightly like they were alive. When I reached the top, I paused, listening. The hall stretched ahead, dimly lit, the same paintings of ocean scenes lining the walls. The air felt colder up here. A door at the far end, the one that had been empty before, was slightly ajar. Something in me wanted to run, but curiosity is its own kind of gravity. I moved forward. My hand brushed against the wall, and I felt how cold it was, like the sea had seeped through the very bones of the house. I stopped at the door and listened. Nothing. Then faintly a sound that could have been breathing, or just the wind through the window. I pushed the door open. The room was dark again, bathed in that same blue light from the moon. The curtains swayed gently. I took a cautious step inside, scanning the room. The bed was still perfectly made, but the window was open now. The sheer curtains fluttered inward, bringing with them the smell of salt and seaweed. And there, on the windowsill, something glimmered. I stepped closer. It was my father's wedding ring. I recognized it instantly. The worn gold band, the tiny scratch near the edge from where he'd caught it on the garden fence years ago. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was ice cold. For a second, I thought I could still feel the faint impression of his hand around it. A chill ran through me. I turned toward the door again and nearly jumped out of my skin. The hallway light was off. Total darkness stretched beyond the doorway. "Mom?" I whispered again, though I knew she couldn't answer. Then faintly from somewhere below, I heard her voice. Soft. Calm. "You shouldn't have come back inside." My stomach twisted. "Mom?" Silence. I moved toward the door, my pulse pounding so loud it drowned out every other sound. The shadows in the hallway seemed to stretch, bending toward me. I took a deep breath, forced myself forward, step by step, until I was halfway down the stairs. The lights flickered again, the same warm glow flashing cold for an instant. Then something moved in the corner of my vision. At the bottom of the stairs stood a figure, not my mother. It was a man, tall, shoulders slightly hunched, dressed in what looked like damp, dark clothes that clung to his skin. His head was tilted slightly as though listening. His face was hidden in shadow. I froze mid-step. "Dad?" No response. He took one step forward. The sound of water dripped faintly onto the marble floor beneath him. My throat went dry. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Every instinct screamed to turn, to escape, but some desperate part of me still wanted to believe this wasn't what it looked like. "Dad," I said again, my voice shaking. "Please, say something." The figure stopped, tilted its head the other way, and in a voice that was almost a whisper, almost human, it said, "Why did you bring us here?" My blood ran cold. I I wanted you to have this," I stammered. "It was supposed to be your home, a gift. I wanted you to be happy." The figure shifted again, one slow step closer. The air in the room grew colder, thick with the smell of salt and something older, deeper, like the bottom of the sea. "This place doesn't belong to you," it said, the voice fragile, distorted, like it was speaking through water. My hand found the railing, gripping it so tight my knuckles ached. Who are you? It tilted its head slightly again. You forgot us. My breath caught. Us? The lights flickered once more, and for a split second, the figure wasn't alone. Behind it, shapes. Vague outlines of people standing just inside the doorway, their faces blurred by the shimmer of the light. Dozens of them, silent, still, watching. Then the lights went out completely. I couldn't breathe. I felt the floor beneath me, solid but unreal, the darkness absolute. The only sound was the rhythm of my pulse and the whisper of the ocean outside. I reached for my phone in my pocket, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The weak beam cut through the dark, and the hallway was empty. The figures were gone. I stumbled down the last few steps, my chest heaving. Stop it! I shouted into the empty room. Stop it! Leave me alone! The words echoed back, swallowed by the emptiness. Then faintly, I heard a voice behind me. My mother's voice. Don't shout, she said softly. You'll wake them. I spun around. She was standing at the top of the stairs now, her face pale, her nightgown dry, her hair perfectly in place, as if nothing had happened. Her expression was calm, too calm, like she'd been watching all along. Mom, I said, my voice breaking. How? She raised a hand, silencing me. You don't understand yet, she said. This house isn't a gift, it's a door. My breath caught. A door? She nodded slowly, descending the stairs one step at a time. It's where the sea ends and begins again. He knew that. That's why he wanted to come here. I shook my head. Mom, listen to yourself. This isn't real. She reached the bottom of the stairs and smiled sadly. It's more real than you think. You built it on their graves. I froze. Whose graves? She gestured toward the windows, the waves beyond them. The ones who came before, the ones who tried to tame the sea. You gave them walls, windows, a name on paper. You thought you were buying land, but you were buying them. I backed away slowly. You're not making sense. She smiled faintly, her eyes glinting in the low light. Neither did I at first, but he explained it to me. He told me the sea keeps what it's owed. I shook my head, whispering, no. She reached out, her fingers brushing my cheek. Her skin was cool, almost damp. You shouldn't have given us this place, she said softly. Now it won't let you go either. For a heartbeat, I forgot to breathe. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, the piano started again. This time, it wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. The notes came sharp, discordant, like someone slamming their hands against the keys in anger. My mother's eyes flicked toward the sound, her expression changing. He's here, she whispered. The lights flickered once more, and every door in the house slammed shut. The crash of the doors jolted me backward. For a heartbeat, I thought the house was collapsing, but the sound settled into a low, endless vibration, as if the walls were humming. My mother didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, eyes closed, as though she could hear something deeper inside the noise. I wanted to shout, to demand that she stop, that she tell me what she meant about a door and graves and debts. But my voice felt trapped behind my ribs. The lights flickered again. The piano fell silent. Only the low hum of the sea remained. Then I realized it wasn't the house vibrating. It was me. My hands were shaking so hard that the keys in my pocket rattled like coins. Mom, I whispered, please talk to me. She opened her eyes. The softness had returned, but it was tired now, almost human again. You never asked where the money came from, she said quietly. I blinked, confused. What are you talking about? The gift, she said. The house, the way you could afford it. You told yourself you earned it, that you'd built everything from nothing. But you knew that wasn't true. I shook my head. Of course it was. I worked. Her voice cut through mine. You gambled on what you couldn't control. The sea, the markets, it's all the same. You borrowed against luck, against time. You offered something you didn't understand. I felt my stomach twist. That has nothing to do with this. Everything does, she said. You opened a door the moment you signed the deed. You invited everything you'd hidden from into these walls. She walked past me toward the living room. I followed because I couldn't do anything else. The air grew colder with every step. The glass doors that looked out over the water were wide open now, though I hadn't heard them move. The wind pushed through, carrying the smell of salt and rain. My mother stood at the threshold, the ocean spread before her. "You said this was a mansion," she murmured, "but it's only a mirror." I swallowed hard. A mirror of what? Of what you gave up to become who you are. Lightning flickered somewhere far out at sea. For a heartbeat, I saw her reflection in the glass. Younger, brighter, like the woman I remembered from childhood. And behind her, faint and blurred, a man's outline, my father's, smiling the way he used to when he finished building something with his hands. I turned quickly, but no one was there. When I looked back at her, she was still watching the horizon. "He built things that lasted," she said. "You built things that glimmered, and now the glimmer is gone." I felt anger rise, sharp and defensive. "I bought this for you," I said. "Everything I did was for you both. I wanted you to have peace." She looked at me then, truly looked, and I saw tears gathering at the edges of her eyes. "Peace isn't something you can buy," she whispered. "It's something you make space for, and you never left yourself any space." The words struck like a tide. I realized I didn't even know when I'd last sat with them without checking my phone, when I'd last visited without worrying about a meeting or an account balance. Every gift I'd given had been an apology wrapped in success. Thunder rolled across the water. She turned back toward the house. "It's time to close it," she said. "Close what?" "The door you opened." She reached for my hand. Her skin felt cool but solid, real. Together, we stepped back inside. The lights dimmed as though the house were exhaling. I felt something shift. Not a noise, but a weight lifting. A current reversing. The photographs on the walls, the seascapes, the lighthouses, flickered as if they were windows. For a breathless moment, I thought I saw people moving in them, walking along the distant shorelines, fading with the receding tide. Then it was gone. The house was still again. The air felt ordinary. My mother released my hand and smiled faintly. "It's yours now," she said, "but don't live here." I tried to speak, but she was already walking down the hallway, her figure dissolving into shadow and light, until the doorway framed only emptiness. "Mom?" I called. No answer. The piano stood silent, the keys unmoving. The house felt smaller, like it had finally settled into its proper size. I stood there for a long time, listening to the wind ease, the ocean softening back to its steady rhythm. Eventually, I turned off the lights and stepped outside. The air was cold but clean. The moon had broken through the clouds, shining silver across the waves. Down below, where the cliffs met the surf, I thought I saw two figures standing together, hand in hand watching the horizon. They looked content, like people who had finally stopped searching for something. The next blink, they were gone. I stayed until dawn, sitting on the grass, letting the sun rise behind me. When its first light touched the water, the mansion looked different. Ordinary, even gentle. The kind of place a person might pass every day without noticing. I left the keys on the porch. As I walked back to my car, I glanced once more at the sea. It shimmered under the new light, calm and endless. Somewhere deep inside, I thought I heard a whisper. Not words, but the faintest sound of release, like an exhale after holding breath for too long. And I finally understood that the house had never belonged to them or to me. It belonged to everything we had tried to keep hidden. And now, at last, it was quiet.